Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast series entitled The Wealth Journey. This episode, we do have to get into the more adult topics, and you'll see what I mean when I dive into it. It's topics that are slightly less fun than picking your first car, but they are topics that are extremely important, like estate planning and what to do in a sort of multi-generational home, and the burdens around certain areas of financial planning in this midlife part. Got two experts with me to help me with that. Jodi Suchard, Seugnet Moggee. Seugnet on our fiduciary side of the wealth management business. Jodi is an advisory partner with the business.
I've been around the industry for a number of years. I've been with Citadel Group for just over 8 years. I'm passionate about assisting families and multi-generational families plan for the future and legacy planning. I've got 3 kids, a mom, work a full day, balance it all.
I'm Seugnet. I'm based in our Claremont office and I've been with Citadel since 2012. I'm an attorney by profession, mom to 1, married for 14 years this year, and just love assisting families with estate planning, drafting specialized wills. Also deal with trusts and acting as professional trustee.
Reach out to us on our website, citadel.co.za. If there's any links on the platform that you're watching or listening on, use those too. From starting your career to having kids, buying your first house, buying your first car, we're now in the sort of promotion phase. You're moving up, you're earning more money. In that environment where you're starting to earn more money for the first time, and maybe a lot more money than you're used to, how do you think about the financial planning aspects and the financial management aspects of that, Jodi?
A lot of people get skewed by earning money. They need to spend more money, ultimately. When you start earning a bit more money, what's important to do is pay off that debt as quickly as possible, but not lose sight of the saving aspect as well. So you need to balance the paying off together with the saving, but you need to live within your means because you're always planning for your retirement. And we do talk about lifestyle and how to just pay off the debt together with, if you're looking at other investments, that's an opportunity to start exploring alternatives as well.
Some people go through that early part of their career. They didn't save necessarily because they felt like they couldn't afford it.
Correct.
Now they're making more money, but they still feel like they shouldn't save because they now almost feel like it's too late. So what would you say to those people?
It's never too late. The only time it's too late is when you've retired. Then potentially we've got problems, but it's never too late to start the journey. We also help you with a roadmap. So our whole plan is to develop a lifelong cash flow, like a budget. When you started, when you're young, you always work within your means. Even now, today, I'm sure we all have budgets that we say, okay, these are our current expenses and ad hoc expenses we always plan for. But within that, we also work out how much money do you need to save every year to become financially independent. So if somebody's retiring tomorrow, we just need to speed up the process somehow. But it's never too late to start your journey with us.
You can budget and you can budget well, but thinking about the next 10 years or 20 years, planning for retirement, even me as an investment professional, I need a wealth manager to help me.
You should never manage your own money. Why? We are human beings governed by emotion, fear, greed, sentiment. So we never want to sell when the market's doing well, whereas a wealth manager is more clinical.
So now I want to bring you in on a crucially important topic. We've just had a baby. He's 3 months old. And I'm going to be honest, I don't have a will.
No.
That's a big problem, Nish. Big problem.
Now,
to jump in quickly, what people don't realize is the minimum age of when you can get a will. You can execute a will.
Okay.
The minimum age in terms of the Wills Act is 16. So I encourage my clients frequently when they've got kids and sort of bring them in the conversations of estate planning when they're 16, and then I encourage them, bring them in, let's draft a will for them. Sometimes they say to me, yeah, but I don't own anything. Just getting into the habit of drafting a will and planning.
So what is actually involved in getting a will done?
First step, Nish, is just to get a professional involved that actually knows the formalities when drafting a will and executing a will. Ensure that you've got this carefully drafted document that's according to your holistic estate planning process. It's that whole process of planning for your assets for the anticipation of death one day. So, and that can be even before death or after. And a will is sort of your foundation document of your estate plan. So make an appointment with your professional trusted advisor, so someone that deals with and has knowledge of your holistic estate plan, where your assets are held. Have the discussion for them to take the notes and then draft that will, and then execution, having competent witnesses
Yes, exactly.
sign the will. 2 of them, according to the Wills Act, competent, so they have to be older than 14, can't be involved in the will or named, as well as those persons' spouses.
It's never the responsibility of the individual, like yourself. Your wealth manager or your person, your trusted advisor, actually should be doing this on a regular basis. We check absolutely everything, being the updated wills, letter of wishes for trust, offshore, local, holistic planning, to ensure that we're on top of everything and that we haven't missed one legal document.
It's because circumstances change so frequently. That's why that trusted advisor to prompt you to have the
Correct.
conversation, like what's changed in your life, to then know, okay, we need to incorporate this in the will.
We're talking now about sort of multi-generational families. There's this sandwich generation idea where current people, younger people, are in the middle looking after younger people and older people. So how does that fit into a financial plan?
You've got to look at your budget, that if you're looking after multiple generations, or we plan for it in your cash flow. So we're not surprised if a wedding were to come up, a grandchild that comes up, your mom, your dad that you're supporting, that all these are planned for in your current budget, and it also caters for your current income. Then you can't overspend and only receive a certain amount. So there's got to also be a thin line between how much do you give to the next generation as well. You've also got to teach children the concept of saving. And I know the older generation, unfortunately, there's a work-life stopping point. But everyone else, you need to give them the skills, even if you have abundance, the skills to become independent themselves. But budgeting, that's key.
People often say things like, well, when my parent reaches a certain age, I'm going to put them in a home, but it's financially has implications, but emotionally has implications, and you don't know until you get there.
Also, that's why you mustn't manage your own money. You need to be clinical when it comes to making decisions, and you need to have a business relationship.
We're in the midlife phase, potentially that marriage sours, and we have a divorce. The implications around divorce and the things we need to think about in a very emotional situation, but from a financial perspective and specifically a fiduciary perspective.
When your marriage ends in divorce, you've almost got a grace period in terms of the Wills Act of 3 months to update your will, unless you intend for your former spouse to inherit from you. So that section in the Wills Act basically determines that if you die within the 3 months, then your former spouse will be regarded as being predeceased. So they'll be regarded as no longer there, so they won't inherit from you. But if you die after the 3 months and you haven't changed your will, then your former spouse will inherit from you unless you intended for them to inherit.
So many layers to this. And from a financial perspective, the obvious one that most people are thinking about is, well, my assets get split down the middle. But what else do we need to think about, Jodi?
You cannot be ignorant when it comes to your own financial plan, your own financial strategy, and be included in every meeting. There are structures, of course, that state that divorce, like an offshore pension, perfect example, states that an offshore pension does not form part of your divorce settlement. So there are certain things like that can shield you from splitting the assets, but it all goes down to your antenuptial contract. What happens if a situation happens and you get divorced? So you do need to ensure that you are well educated with the financial affairs and also keep money saved for yourself. So I'm not saying collectively don't save, but save individually as well, because that's also very, very important to ensure that you can pay your bills.
But in a case where there's no will and a spouse had to pass away, or a divorce situation had to happen, things can get very tricky, very, very.
Absolutely, because then the interstate succession laws will apply, which is not what your wishes would be through a will. So then a separate act legislation determines who will inherit And that can get messy if you've got minors and you haven't provided for testamentary trusts to be set up for them.
We still hear the word trusts bandied about. Why and for what reason would someone use a trust?
You get different types of trusts. So obviously I've touched on the testamentary trust,
Sure.
which is a trust that's set up when someone dies through a will. So different animal. And then you've got something called inter vivos trust. So that is a trust that's set up during one's lifetime now. So you would do that for various reasons. And a trust is essentially a contract, that a donor funds a trust to trustees to manage those funds for the benefit of a third party who are the beneficiaries. You can't set up a trust solely for tax benefits. So then you are doing it for the wrong reasons.
Sure.
So that can definitely be part of the reasons, but mostly for asset protection, especially if you've got family members that struggle with substance abuse. We see that happen sometimes. So you want to sort of protect them from themselves, or people with disability, whether it be physical, intellectual. So then to put the funds in a trust for them, or family members that become incapacitated as with dementia, Alzheimer's, that kind of thing.
Trust fund baby is often a term bandied around, but it's a form of moving assets from parent to child at some point, I guess.
Exactly.
And it falls outside your estate.
Falls outside, yeah. I'm quite
Yes.
Why is that important?
Estate duty. So that's a key topic. So estate duties are, which you're going to pay tax wherever you are. So there is a state duty levied on the assets held in your personal name. So that will trigger, if you hold assets in your personal name, you'll trigger a state duty obligation payment. However, if it's money between spouses, I'm taking over your role, full Q exemption applies, that there is no estate duty. So the estate duty gets pushed over to the last surviving spouse. And when that surviving spouse passes away, you'll be liable for estate duty. But a lot of people set up offshore and local trusts to create a legacy for next generation. But unfortunately, trusts are becoming more onerous, more expensive. You can't hide.
Some clients just do not want any complex matters in their lives, even though they, own a whole bunch of assets in their personal names. They just don't want anything to do with trust and the complexity. So that's also a consideration we have, but still relevant, I want to say.
Very
for the
relevant.
right reasons, for the right families, with the right circumstances.
The first conversation we have with the client is, what is your plan?
Yes.
We don't talk about what our plan is. What do you want? What is your future looking like? When do you want to retire? Are you immigrating? Because if you're immigrating, it's a different conversation. Offshore trust, is it worthwhile setting up? What's the exit taxes? So it's all about we building our financial plan around you and your family, not what we want for you.
There's this new trend of, and it's because of the sort of market environment we've been in for a while, where kids come out of the house, whether it's high school, whether it's university, maybe they're not finding a job as quickly as they could have in the past. They're still dependent on their parents to a certain extent. What are you seeing in terms of themes and trends in that regard?
By the time they finish matric, then they go study, and I don't believe ever, they're still dependent on the parents, which is something to point out, because the parents are still going to pay for their rental and the like. But we are seeing kids becoming more dependent on their parents the older they progress in life. The point is educating them. So you're bringing them in, listening to the conversations, but you don't have to put numbers to the conversation when they're still little.
Yeah.
My whole philosophy is, if you educate your kids, education's key. Education, they will find a job. They will become independent. But you've got to also allow them to become independent.
But let's say we're in a situation where a parent does want to be involved in certain aspects, like a wedding, for example. So do you now fit that into a financial plan? What needs to be considered there?
We do budget for it, because we budget for education, we budget for weddings, we budget for grandchildren, and it's all budgeted in your lifelong cash flow. So it's something that it's a once-off expense, but we ensure that how much can you spend on this wedding? You can't overspend, but there's a limit. So we do plan for it and factor it in. And that's a conversation you need to have with your kids as well, to say, this is what we've set aside. So work within the budget. So I'm not saying your life is predictable, but the cash flow does ensure that we can plan for any circumstance that comes comes their way.
And I know some of you are watching this going, well, it's nice that some people have an inheritance and I don't have an inheritance. But I mean, it is part of a financial plan. Some people can have significant amounts of money coming to them, and we have to plan for that.
Yeah.
So how would you even have that conversation on someone getting an inheritance in potentially?
One of the key questions that I would ask my clients, do you perhaps have an existing trust already now that we can utilize in your parents' will for you to rather inherit through that vehicle rather than personally, so that it can be protected?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, are you wealthy enough potentially that we can skip your generation so that grandparents can rather directly bequeath to your children?
Yes.
That kind of thing. So that is important points to consider.
But also the letter of wishes. So we talk about trusts and local and offshore. That actually defines how the money should be distributed to the beneficiaries and at what milestones will they receive the money.
Yeah.
I call it governing from the grave, but a lot of people say it's my money. This is what I expect to be the rules, a rule book. They even, a significant number of families write family constitutions where it's not a legally binding
Exactly,
document.
that's what I wanted to say.
Exactly
They must
that.
realize that.
But it is the wish of the person that is leaving this legacy and how it should be distributed and how the business potentially should be run and what will happen at certain parameters. So it's important to have a conversation with people so they understand the kids, they understand the plan. And a lot of individuals don't want to bring their kids in until they're at the right age and they're able to get involved with money and planning, because exactly the point, trust fund baby. You don't want your kid to be a trust fund baby. You want them to study, work, and also make a living for themselves. And the benefit, yes, they'll get an inheritance, but that's the cherry on the top.
So if you've had any questions on anything related to some of the elements, reach out to us. We can help you and we're willing to have that conversation. Thank you to our guests and thank you guys for joining us. Goodbye.